All right, fellas. So this time around, I'm gonna talk about the ticket symbol VOO. It is the Vanguard's version of the S&P 500. So a little bit first before I get into this video, I'm gonna talk about the gameplay in the background. Whoever remembers Verdun Heights operations specifically back in Battlefield 1, you are a legend. This is the only operations map that went from 250 tickets to 350 just because it's so damn hard to get up the hill. It's not like it's not like adding extra people into a battle that's already hard to win will do anything. But at least we have extra tries to try to get up the hill. But anyways, enough of the gameplay. I just used the sniper to try to pick up people's heads like how I did right there. And yeah, so the VOO, what is VOO? So it is basically an exchange traded fund, an ETF that tracks the S&P 500, and the 500 represents the 500 largest and publicly traded companies in the U.S. So we have companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. And it's all bundled up into one simple, low cost investment, low costing stock, if you will, right? So what makes this actually so popular as opposed to buying smaller funds or different versions of the S&P. I know there's the S&P 100, etc. So I'm gonna start talking about the pros and cons and to see if it's the right investment for yourself. I think in general, even if you're new to investing or even an experienced trader, there's a good chance that you have heard of this version of the S&P ETF, and there's a reason why it's so good, right? And of course, even though it's so good, it also has a lot of cons to it. So yeah, the pros of investing is simple. So it's just instant diversification to begin with. So that's the number one point for all the pros here. It's not that you're only betting on one single stock. Your investment is basically an exposure to all 500 companies. That is a mixture between the technology sector, healthcare, finance, energy, and a few more like consumer goods, oil, which falls on energy. But yeah, it's an instant diversification. So if one industry decides to struggle, the exposure of the stock or the ETF that it has between all the multiple other sectors will keep you afloat. And that's the point of the S&P, right? Like you have your money is exposed to 500 different companies. So if a few are struggling, then you have pretty much the rest that keeps it going, right? The second pro is a low expense ratio. VOO's expense ratio is just at 0.03%. So what this means is that for every $10,000 that you're invested in, you only pay $3 a year in management fees. It's definitely one of the cheapest ways to invest into the entire market without spending a lot of money. Right. So what I do know is that the S&P constantly has to rebalance its exposure to different markets. So for like an example, it could be an example would be like perhaps its weight on Apple could be 22%, and the next time it needs to rebalance its portfolio, it could be that Apple has a larger or a shorter share of the S&P pie. All right, so the third pro would be the long, strong term in performance. So historically, the S&P 500 has returned up from about 8 to 10% annually after inflation. And keep in mind, this is after inflation. This is after the inflation rate from anything between 3, 4, 5% to 9% that we have seen recently. Food tracks this nearly perfectly, and over the decades, it has returned this kind of amount consistently throughout the year. So it has that historical data to back the performance and consistency of this kind of performance of the S&P. And the fourth point would be it is definitely great for investors. So we don't always have to be worried about picking what is the winning stock. The S&P or VOOs, the VOO, the ticket symbol VOO, takes care of that for you by pretty much mirroring the market's biggest winners, biggest players, and dropping the underperformers automatically. So the fifth biggest, or sorry, the fifth pro that I have for you guys is that Vanguard is basically known for its investors first philosophy. There is so it, all this means is that it's owned by people that invest in their funds and not just outside shareholders. All of this is saying is that there's people within that invest in these funds, and that's just other people who just own Vanguard that owns the S&P, or at least their version of the S&P. So now on to the cons. The cons of investing is to begin with, is no active management. So the issue with this is that you won't always beat the market heavily with VOO. And this is basically saying that because you won't always beat the market with VOO, because VOO it basically is the market. It's basically the highest players, or the biggest players in the market. So if you're basically investing in them, the people who the companies that run the market, it doesn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense to try to beat the market since you already are invested in the market itself. So if you're looking for outperformance, if you're looking for outliers of peak performance, then VOO is not it. Again, VOO is more for passive investment. You invest in it and dollar cost average into it as time progresses, and eventually you'll see consistent gains. But that doesn't mean you will ever see an outperformance that you will see with the gamble with other single stocks. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing is that it is heavily weighted towards tech. So the top 10 of the 500 companies that VOO tracks is basically big tech. So we have Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon as an example. So if tech struggles, then VOO's performance will also struggle too, since most of its exposure is towards the tech industry. And this is important because even though other sectors may be doing well, but because VOO has a stronger exposure to tech industry, then this means that tech will bring those better performing industries down. So the third point is that you have limited exposure to international markets. So the S&P is mainly focused on U.S. companies. So this means that if global markets, international markets, are obviously outside the U.S. outperforms the U.S. market, then you're not going to be able to see that investment or that performance with the S&P, because the S&P mainly tracks or only tracks U.S. companies. So yeah, the fourth and last con that I have for you guys is that if since the S&P tracks the market, the U.S. market, this also means that if the market is doing well, then we see promising returns. But if we see a strong recession like how we did back in 2008 and during the pandemic, then we will see terrible losses in within the S&P, and this is basically by its design. The positive the positive of the S&P is that it tracks the market. So that if the market is doing really well, then we see that reflected within the S&P. If the market is doing really bad, then like how we saw in these recessions, then the S&P will also go down too. So, transitioning away from the pros and cons of investing in the S&P, for specifically Vanguard's version of the S&P 500, I want to explore now who is best for this S&P ETF fund. So this one is ideal for people who want long-term hands-off investing, exposure to the top performing US companies, and a proven low cost way to grow wealth over time. So ideally, this is more perfect for those retirement card accounts within the IRA or for the 1Ks, and pretty much those who want to build a portfolio without actively managing that portfolio. So if you're trying to actively beat the market or want exposure to more growing international stocks, then the S&P 500 by itself in general is not going to be enough. So my final thoughts before I let you guys go. So I would say the S&P is more like that infamous Toyota Corolla that's always reliable. It's always efficient, and it's definitely built to last. But it's not flashy. It's not anything special in terms of it being that luxury item that some people would prefer having. But the flip side to that is definitely reliable. It gets the job done, and it's very efficient. And most importantly, it is built to last. So think of that as a metaphor to the S&P. S&P isn't all that, but in the long term, it gets the job done. But I do want to know what you guys think. Do you guys own the S&P 500 or any version of S&Ps? Maybe you have SPY or IVV, or maybe you own VOO, or are you more focused on individual stocks or international market exposure? So I would like to know. If you want to drop your comments below and tell me what other stocks or funds you guys want me to cover, I'll definitely be open to cover those to cover those recommendations. All right then, fellas. Later.
We have lost objective apples.
Gesundheit ab.